In 1858, on a humid Charleston morning, an enslaved laundress named Celia stood over a wash tub filled with boiling water, holding her mistress beneath the surface while the woman who had tormented her for 15 years finally experienced what it felt like to be powerless, helpless, and completely at someone else's mercy. But what drove Celia to transform from gentle caretaker to merciless executioner wasn't just cruelty. It was the ultimate betrayal that shattered the last piece of her humanity. Welcome back to Buried Truths, where we uncover the stories they buried and give voice to those they silenced. I'm about to take you into the steam-filled laundry room where patience finally boiled over, where years of accumulated injustice bubbled up into the most scalding revenge in Charleston's history. This isn't just about murder. This is about what happens when the invisible finally make themselves seen, when the servant becomes the master, and when boiling water becomes the baptism of justice. So ask yourself right now, what would it take for you to stop swallowing your rage and start serving it back scalding hot? What final straw would break your back and turn your hands into weapons? Keep that question simmering in your mind, because by the end of Celia's story, you'll understand exactly why some wash tubs hold more than just dirty laundry. The year 1858 found Charleston, South Carolina, drunk on its own elegance and refinement, but in the basement laundries and servant quarters of its grand mansions, something far different was brewing. On Laundress Street, in the imposing Whitfield mansion with its perfect gardens and gleaming surfaces, a woman was about to prove that the most dangerous person in any house is the one who knows all your secrets and handles all your intimate belongings. Celia had been the Whitfield family's head laundress for 15 years, her life measured in endless cycles of washing, scrubbing, boiling, and pressing. From 4 in the morning until well past dark, she labored over steaming tubs and scorching irons, transforming the evidence of the family's daily existence into pristine perfection. Her hands were permanently scarred from lye burns, her back bent from years over wash basins, her lungs damaged from inhaling steam and chemical fumes. But Celia possessed something that made her invaluable to the Whitfield household and dangerous to everyone in it. She was a master of her craft. She could remove any stain, repair any tear, transform the most soiled garment into something that looked brand new. More importantly, she was invisible to the family members who confided their darkest secrets while she worked silently around them, absorbing every whispered confession, every hidden shame, every family scandal. Mrs. Eleanor Whitfield was Charleston High Society's perfect hostess, beautiful, refined, charitable in public, and absolutely vicious in private. Behind the closed doors of her mansion, she ruled through psychological torture, finding creative ways to humiliate and degrade the people forced to serve her. She had a particular talent for identifying what each person valued most and then systematically destroying it. For 15 years, Mrs. Whitfield had treated Celia not just as property, but as her personal stress relief. When dinner parties went badly, Celia was beaten. When Mr. Whitfield disappointed his wife, Celia's food rations were cut. When the weather was too hot or too cold for Mrs. Whitfield's liking, Celia was forced to rewash entire loads of already clean laundry as punishment for imaginary imperfections. The cruelty that would ultimately seal Mrs. Whitfield's fate went far beyond physical abuse. She had discovered that Celia had secretly been teaching herself to read using discarded newspapers and old books found in the trash. Instead of simply punishing this crime, Mrs. Whitfield turned it into ongoing torture. She would leave books and letters lying around, then fly into manufactured rage when she discovered Celia looking at them, using it as an excuse for increasingly severe punishments. The psychological warfare escalated when Mrs. Whitfield learned that Celia had been saving money, pennies stolen over years from pocket change left in laundry, hoping someday to purchase her freedom, or at least that of her children. Mrs. Whitfield confiscated every coin, then forced Celia to watch as she threw the money into the fireplace, burning years of desperate hope, while laughing about how black were too stupid to understand that they would never be free. But the final, unforgivable act came in the spring of 1858, when Mrs. Whitfield discovered that Celia had been secretly corresponding with her eldest daughter, Hannah, who had been sold to a plantation in Georgia 5 years earlier. The letters, painstakingly written in Celia's self-taught handwriting and smuggled through a network of traveling servants, were the only connection Celia had to her child. Mrs. Whitfield didn't just confiscate the letters. She forced Celia to watch as she read them aloud in a mocking voice, imitating what she called black gibberish while describing Hannah's desperate pleas to see her mother again. Then she burned the letters one by one while Celia was forced to hold the candle that provided the flame. "Your daughter is dead to you now," Mrs. Whitfield announced with the casual cruelty that had made her famous among Charleston's enslaved community. "And if I ever catch you trying to contact her again, I'll make sure she dies for real. Now get back to your washing and stop sniveling." That was the moment Celia's humanity finally boiled away, leaving behind something far more dangerous than anger, cold, calculating purpose. She returned to her laundry room that day, not as a broken woman, but as an executioner who had just received her final assignment. For 3 months, she planned with the same meticulous attention to detail that she brought to removing impossible stains. The laundry room where Celia spent her days was a hell of steam and scalding water. Massive iron kettles sat over wood fires, kept at a rolling boil for hours to sanitize the family's clothing and linens. The room was isolated in the mansion's basement, soundproofed by stone walls and the constant noise of bubbling water and scrubbing. Most importantly, it was Celia's domain, the one place in the house where she had absolute authority and where family members rarely ventured. Celia began to study Mrs. Whitfield's routines with scientific precision. She noted when the woman came downstairs, what brought her to different parts of the house, how long she typically stayed in each location. She identified Tuesday mornings as optimal. Mr. Whitfield would be at his office, the children at their tutoring sessions, and most of the other servants busy with weekly market shopping. The plan that crystallized in Celia's mind was beautifully simple and horrifically poetic. Mrs. Whitfield had always complained that the laundry took too long, that Celia was lazy and inefficient. On Tuesday, August 17, 1858, Celia would invite her mistress to see exactly how hard the work really was. That morning dawned humid and oppressive, the kind of Charleston heat that made even breathing feel like labor. Celia rose at her usual 4 o'clock and began heating the wash water, but today she stoked the fires hotter than ever before. By the time Mrs. Whitfield made her appearance around 9 o'clock, the laundry room was thick with steam and the smell of lye soap. "Celia," Mrs. Whitfield's voice cut through the humid air like a whip crack. "These linens still have stains in them. Are you blind or just stupid? I want them rewashed immediately." Celia looked up from the massive washtub where water roiled at a violent boil, her face a mask of perfect servitude. "Yes, ma'am, Mrs. Whitfield. But perhaps you'd like to see exactly what goes into getting your linen so white and perfect." "Perfect," Mrs. Whitfield, always eager for an opportunity to find fault and inflict punishment, stepped closer to the washtub. "What are you talking about, girl?" "Well, ma'am, first the water has to be exactly the right temperature. Hot enough to kill every bit of dirt and disease, but not so hot that it damages the fabric." Celia gestured to the violently bubbling cauldron. "Would you like to test it yourself?" Before Mrs. Whitfield could respond, Celia's powerful laundress arms, strengthened by 15 years of lifting heavy wet fabrics and stirring boiling vats, shot out with lightning speed. Her hands grabbed Mrs. Whitfield's shoulders, and with the smooth efficiency of someone who had practiced the motion in her mind 1,000 times, she plunged the woman headfirst into the boiling wash water. The scream that erupted from the washtub was inhuman, a sound of pure agony that echoed off the stone walls of the laundry room, before being swallowed by the bubbling water. Mrs. Whitfield's hands clawed frantically at the sides of the tub, her feet kicking desperately as she tried to push herself up, but Celia's grip was iron strong and absolutely merciless. "This is for Hannah," Celia said in a voice as calm as if she were discussing the weather, pressing Mrs. Whitfield's head deeper into the scalding water. "This is for every letter you burned, every dream you crushed, every time you made me watch my hope die in your fireplace." Mrs. Whitfield managed to surface for a split second, her face already blistering from the boiling water, her mouth open in a wordless scream of terror and pain. But Celia pushed her down again, this time holding her firmly beneath the roiling surface. "And this," Celia continued, watching with scientific interest as the water around Mrs. Whitfield's submerged head turned pink with blood from burst blisters, "is for thinking you could break me. For 15 years, you've tried to boil the humanity out of me. Today, I return the favor." The struggling grew weaker, more desperate, then finally stopped altogether. Celia held Mrs. Whitfield's lifeless body under the water for another full minute, ensuring there would be no miraculous recovery, no last-second escape from justice. When she finally released her grip, The woman who had terrorized her for 15 years floated face down in the washtub like a piece of discarded laundry. But Celia wasn't finished. With the same methodical precision she brought to her daily work, she arranged the scene to tell the story she wanted told. She positioned Mrs. Whitfield's body so it appeared she had slipped while leaning over the tub, her head striking the edge before she fell into the boiling water. She scattered soap and linens around to suggest an accidental fall during routine laundry inspection. Then Celia did something that revealed the true depth of her psychological transformation. She calmly continued her washing. When the other servants returned from market shopping an hour later, they found her scrubbing linens in a tub next to the one where Mrs. Whitfield's body floated, humming a spiritual under her breath, as if nothing had happened. "Oh my Lord!" screamed Sarah the cook when she discovered the body. Mrs. Whitfield done fell in the wash water. Celia looked up with perfect surprise, dropping her scrub brush and rushing to the tub with every appearance of shock and horror. Sweet Jesus, how did this happen? She must have slipped on the wet floor. The investigation that followed was perfunctory at best. The Charleston police, faced with what appeared to be a tragic accident involving a clumsy white woman and a dangerous household task, saw no reason to look deeper. The physical evidence supported the story. Mrs. Stunnett. Whitfield had clearly fallen into the boiling water, and there were no signs of struggle or violence beyond what would be expected from someone trying to escape scalding liquid. Celia played her role perfectly, sobbing over the loss of her dear mistress and expressing guilt that she hadn't been able to prevent the tragedy. The other servants who had witnessed 15 years of Mrs. Whitfield's cruelty weren't particularly motivated to question Celia's story too closely. If anything, many of them seemed relieved that their tormentor was finally gone. But the enslaved community knew. They recognized the signs, the too-perfect accident, the convenient timing, the subtle satisfaction in Celia's eyes despite her public grief. Word spread through Charleston's servant networks like wildfire. Celia had finally boiled over, and Mrs. Whitfield had paid the price. The story became legend among the city's enslaved population, whispered in slave quarters and servant halls as both warning and inspiration. The gentle laundress who had endured 15 years of abuse had finally found her breaking point, and when she reached it, she had used the very tools of her oppression to exact perfect revenge. Mr. Whitfield, devastated by his wife's accidental death, sold Celia within a month to a plantation outside Savannah. But by then it didn't matter. She had already achieved something that no amount of punishment could take away. She had proven that even the most powerless person could become powerful when pushed far enough, that even the most trusted servant could become the most dangerous enemy. Celia lived another 23 years after Mrs. Whitfield's death, working on various plantations throughout Georgia and South Carolina. Those who knew her in later life described her as a quiet woman who rarely spoke about her past, but carried herself with an unmistakable dignity. She never married again, never had more children, and never showed any sign of remorse for what she had done in that steaming Charleston laundry room. When the Civil War came and slavery finally ended, Celia was one of the few formerly enslaved people who didn't celebrate openly. She'd already won her war years earlier, in a basement laundry room, where boiling water had finally served justice instead of just cleaning clothes. The psychological impact of Celia's revenge extended far beyond the Whitfield household. Throughout Charleston's high society, white families began to look at their laundresses, cooks, and house servants with new wariness. The comfortable fiction that enslaved people were grateful for their treatment became much harder to maintain when confronted with the reality that their most trusted servants might be planning their deaths while folding their underwear. Importantly, the story provided something precious to Charleston's enslaved community, proof that resistance could take forms other than open rebellion. Sometimes the most effective revolution happened not in the fields with armies, but in the basement with a washtub and 15 years of accumulated rage. The boiling water that claimed Mrs. Whitfield became a symbol of transformation, not just the transformation of dirty cloth into clean fabric, but the transformation of victim into victor, of servant into judge, of powerless into powerful. Celia had used the very instrument of her daily oppression to deliver her ultimate liberation. Think about the psychological strength required for Celia's plan. She had to maintain perfect composure for months while planning Mrs. Whitfield's death. She had to continue serving the woman who had destroyed her family, burned her hopes, and systematically crushed her spirit. She had to smile and bow and scrub and iron while calculating the exact moment to strike back. The washtub where Mrs. Whitfield died became a reminder that domestic spaces, seemingly safe and controlled, could harbor the most dangerous forms of resistance. The kitchen where food was prepared, the bedroom where clothes were laid out, the laundry room where intimate garments were cleaned, all of these spaces required trust. And Celia had proven that trust, once broken, could become lethal. Celia's revenge also illuminated the particular vulnerability of white women in the slave-holding South. They depended completely on enslaved labor for their comfort, their status, their daily survival, yet they often treated their servants with casual cruelty that would have horrified them if applied to anyone they considered human. Celia had shown them exactly what that cruelty could cost when it finally met its match. The letters from Hannah that Mrs. Whitfield had burned became symbols of all the connections, hopes, and dreams that slavery systematically destroyed. But they also became symbols of resistance, proof that love could survive even the most brutal attempts to crush it, and that destroying someone's hope might be the most dangerous thing you could do. When Celia held Mrs. Whitfield's head beneath that boiling water, she was drowning more than just one cruel woman. She was drowning the idea that enslaved people would forever accept abuse without consequence, that servants would always remain grateful, no matter how badly they were treated. Oh, that power could never be reversed or challenged. The steam that filled that Charleston laundry room carried with it the hopes and rage of every enslaved person who had ever been forced to clean up after their oppressors, while being treated as less than human. Oh, Celia's revenge was their revenge, her justice their justice, her of power their proof that such moments were possible. So the next time you hear someone romanticize the good old days of Southern hospitality and gracious living, remember Celia and her washtub. Remember the woman who spent 15 years making other people's lives spotless while her own life was systematically soiled. Remember that sometimes the most elegant mansions were built on foundations of rage that could eventually boil over. If this story has moved you, if it's shown you the hidden power that exists in seemingly powerless places, then I need you to do something for me right now. Hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell, because this is exactly the kind of story that polite history wants to wash away. But here at Buried Truths, we're committed to digging up these stories and giving voice to those they silenced. Share this video with someone who needs to understand that resistance takes many forms, that justice can be served from the most unexpected places, and that sometimes the most dangerous person in the room is the one everyone ignores, eh? Leave a comment telling me what other buried truths you want me to uncover. And remember, the stories they buried are the ones that matter most, because they're the ones with the power to change how we see the world. Celia's moment of revenge lasted only minutes, but its impact echoes through American history. She reminds us that dignity, once awakened, is unstoppable, that patience has limits, and that sometimes the hottest water is found not in nature, but in human hearts that have been heated by injustice until they finally boil over. Till next time, keep digging for the truth, because the stories they buried are the ones we need to remember. This is Buried Truths, where we uncover the past to understand the present. The voices they silenced will be heard, and the justice they were denied will find its scalding, purifying way. Remember Celia. Remember the washtub. Remember that sometimes the most elegant surfaces hide the most explosive depths, and that boiling points, once reached, can transform everything they touch.